A couple of months ago, I made a video directly comparing Mavuika and Augusta, and in that video, I broke down how their environment reflects the real-life culture that they're inspired by. I also talked about their costume, how important outfits are as a reflection of real-life cultures. I then talked about their accents, showing how vocal cues give a clear sense of background and identity. And back then, I said that once we got to experience the Augusta story, there will be a part 2 of that video, this time diving into how well the individual stories represent both Augusta and Mavuika as characters. It's about looking at the choices they make, the actions they take, and what those decisions say about them as individuals. And honestly, there's no better time to talk about that than right now. So if you're into this kind of content, make sure to hit the like button and let me know what you think. Which story did you prefer, Mavuika's or Augusta's? Which one felt stronger? Which one do you think was the better representation of the characters behind it? Tell me all that and more in the comments. And of course, subscribe and notification bell to on any of my future videos. Before we get into it, this video is sponsored by Top Up Life. Top Up Life is your go-to for resources in your favorite gacha game. Whether it's characters, weapons, currencies, whatever you need, Top Up Life has it and always at a discount. And right now, Augusta, yes, the F4 of Septimus herself, is finally here. And if you want to pull for her at a discount, or maybe you're saving up for Yuno, who drops right after Augusta, I highly recommend checking them out. And here's the best part, if you use my code TIVE, that is TIVE, you get an extra 12% off on top of their already discounted product. So spend wisely, don't overspend, and get what you need with Top of Life. Huge thanks to them for sponsoring this video, and now let's get into it. When you think about it, the similarities between Augusta and Mavuika's stories are actually kind of insane. Both of them are leaders of a nation that have been battling the literal embodiment of darkness for centuries, maybe even thousands of years. And yet, despite carrying that weight, both of them come across as very human. They're not untouchable icons. They grapple with life just like anybody else. Also, both of their stories are deeply tied to the idea of fate, so much so that even the way fate itself is described in their narratives feels similar. So yeah, the overlap is undeniable, and that's what makes it so interesting. It becomes incredibly easy to compare their story and see how each of them approach their role. So going off of that similarity, we're going to frame the comparison around 2 core ideas. Firstly, leadership. Both Augusta and Mavuika are larger-than-life leaders of glorious nations, but how does the game actually depict leadership in each of them? And ultimately, who comes across as the stronger leader? And secondly, humanity. And really, this encompasses many other things we'll touch on with these characters, but mostly relatability and interest. The human side of characters like this, in a world as out of this world and fantastic as theirs, is what really draws us in. It's what gives us that point of connection, that sense of relatability, that makes us feel something for them beyond their power or their status. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how well these 2 qualities reflect in their stories, how well their stories actually depict them as characters. So with that framework in mind, let's start with the first one, leadership. And right off the bat, I'll give Mavuika the edge in leadership. You see, when I first drafted this comparison, I honestly wanted to call it a tie between Mavuika and Augusta, because no matter what you feel about either character, you can't deny that their stories depict them as excellent leaders. Both are willing to go above and beyond to protect their nations, no matter the threats, and both command respect from almost everyone they encounter. Now, to Augusta's credit, her story frames her as my personal favorite kind of leader. The cool, nonchalant type. I mean, Kuro absolutely aura farms Augusta, and I loved every single one of these moments. But when you put that aside, Mavuika's leadership still stands out. Cause you see, I believe there are certain things that, even if they're implied, never truly hit home unless they're explicitly shown. One of the more obvious examples is strength. No matter how much you read about someone's power or hear stories about it, you will never fully appreciate it unless you actually see them display it. And I think leadership falls into that same category. Yes, you can infer the effects of Mavuika's and Augusta's leadership. You can imagine the kind of people who will be shaped by having a leader like that, but it doesn't hit with the same weight until you actually see those people for yourself. And I believe this animated short about Mavuika called Sunset does a fantastic job of showing exactly what kind of people Mavuika's leadership creates. And now, before anybody points it out, I know that this wasn't something we played through in the game, but it is undeniably a part of the story. And what I love about this show is how it takes these supposedly random NPCs and make them feel not so random. Because the people we see here aren't just filler. They've been mentioned multiple times throughout the game itself, and that familiarity adds weight. It creates anticipation, even excitement, in finally seeing who these people actually are. And with that recognition, at least for me, it became so much easier to admire their admiration for Mavuika, easier to appreciate their courage, their attitude, their devotion, everything about them as people who were, in a sense, shaped and defined by Mavuika's leadership. Now compare all of that to the veteran gladiator and cowardly gladiator in Augusta's story. Yes, technically, these NPCs are also meant to be products of Augusta's leadership, a seasoned gladiator who've seen countless battles, and another who still fights despite being afraid. But let's be honest, these are literally nameless NPCs. With Augusta, I still have to infer what her leadership produces. There's nothing here that gives me the same level of satisfaction as what we saw as the product of Mavuika's leadership in that animated short. And with how similar Augusta and Mavuika are as leaders, that small difference makes all the difference. It's what, in my opinion, makes makes Mavuika's depiction of leadership the stronger one. But then when it comes to the subject of humanity, that is a whole different story. Because say what you will about Genshin Impact, one thing they consistently do well, especially when it comes to the Archons, is the depiction of humanity. Every other Archon has something that grounds them, something that makes them relatable. It could be a flaw or a defining trait. It doesn't really matter what it is. What matters is that it connects them to us, the audience. Take Venti and Zhongli for example, two Archons who left their extremely important positions for pretty mundane reasons, and we can relate to that. The idea of leaving your job or role is something almost everyone has felt at some point. Maybe you just never really liked the work, maybe you wanted to chase something different, something that made you happy, or maybe you've stayed in the same position for so long that the weight of it simply just wore you down, and at some point you decide, no matter how important this job is, I need to step away. And that relatability shows up in other Archons too, whether it's A's flaws, the way Nahida was treated, and honestly every single thing about Furina's life. But Mavuika is a completely different case. A sentiment you often hear about her is how she feels like a Mary Sue. Now, I don't fully agree with that label, but I can absolutely understand where people who say that are coming from. Because more than anything else, what the game chose to depict about Mavuika is her perfection. You see, Mavuika is a genius. The game goes out of its way to show us that she can learn anything in far less time than a normal person. And on the surface, that is supposed to be a good thing, because usually in animes, movies, video games, wherever, the trade-off for genius is that you're flawed in areas where regular people thrive. Things like friendship, relationships, or love. But not Mavuika, because she's also a really good friend. Everyone understands her, everyone feels her presence, everyone believes in her. They put their utmost faith in her, they genuinely value the bond they share with her. The game even proves that Mavuika is so competent that even people who consider her an enemy, even people who come steadfast with their own plans and their own beliefs, eventually come around to supporting her. And on top of that, she's also a great leader, which yeah, we've already talked about as a strength, but here's the thing. She doesn't seem to carry the hidden flaw that usually comes with leadership, the anxiety of it. Because the strong, courageous, stoic Mavuika we see in public is no different from the Mavuika we see in private. Even when the game plays her in a situation where showing her humanity would have felt not only natural but expected. Standing before the spirits of her dead sister, a sister she hadn't seen in 500 years, a sister she was never there to watch grow up. There was nothing, no breakdown, no vulnerability. She was still the strong, stoic Mavuika that we had always known. That moment could have been the perfect chance to show her humanity, but instead, it only reinforced the idea that in addition to being a great friend and a great leader, she was also the perfect child and perfect sister. Her family understood her absence, they acknowledged her choice, they supported her fully, which on the surface is not a bad thing, but given the choice she made to leave her family behind for 500 years, it was honestly surprising that there was no hidden emotion, whether it's a slight animosity or disappointment towards Mavuika, that was shown especially by her family. Because in the end, everything the game tells us about Mavuika comes back to one message: Mavuika is perfect. And this perfection of Mavuika doesn't just shape her as a character, it actually ends up affecting the entire Natlan Archon quest. You see, in an earlier deconstruction video I made about Natlan, I compared Mavuika's role in that quest to Focalors' role in the Fontaine quest. How similar they seemed on the surface, but how absolutely different they were in execution. Both of them had a 500-year-old plan, but here's the core difference. Focalors understood that a plan stretched over centuries could never work without something to course correct. And because of that understanding, not only was one of the greatest characters in Genshin, Furina, created, but it also spoke to the humanity in Focalors. The recognition that no plan can be flawless, no plan can be stretched across that much time without guidance, without adjustments. But not only did Mavuika prove Focalors absolutely wrong by creating a 500-year plan that needed no course correction whatsoever, I'd even argue that Mavuika's plan went smoother than Focalors ever did. Because at the end of everything, when it was finally time for the last battle against the Abyss, every single piece was already in place. And even on the road leading up to the climax, everything just fell perfectly into line. All the warriors, all the prophesized figures needed to bring that plan to life, one by one, they appeared exactly when and where they were supposed to. There wasn't a single moment in the entire story where the plan wavered, where things felt uncertain, or where I thought that this might not work. And that's the core issue. Because of how perfect Mavuika was as a character, and how that perfection spilled over into the entire storyline, it's no surprise that the sentiment around her and her arc is unified. It wasn't just unrelatable, it was boring. Compare that to Augusta, and the difference is night and day. Unlike Mavuika, Augusta isn't just flawed, she is defined by her flaws. The very first time we meet her, Augusta comes across as this larger-than-life figure. The outfit, the confidence, the natural authority. Honestly, I wouldn't have been surprised if Wooden Wave decided to hand her godlike powers on the spot, just because of how she was framed. But here's the twist. Augusta isn't some untouchable genius. She isn't perfect, she is human. In fact, I'd argue that Augusta is possibly the most human resonator in the whole game. Because in the world of Wooden Wave, strength isn't defined by wisdom or leadership. It is defined by your resonance ability. The stronger your resonance ability, the more respect, admiration, and influence you naturally command. Power brings everything with it. So when I say Augusta is the most human resonator, I don't mean it as some lofty metaphor. I mean it literally. Lore-wise, Augusta has possibly the weakest resonance ability in the entire game. And the weakness of her resonance ability is emphasized as a core characteristic of Augusta, whether in the story or even by the game itself. But in a world like that, in Septimont especially, a nation where strength isn't just admired but worshipped, where survival itself demands overwhelming power, Augusta not only managed to rise through the ranks, she became the ruler of that nation. And yet, even in that position, even at the very top, her flaws did not disappear. They followed her, they defined her. You see, unlike Mavuika, Augusta is not loved by everyone. In fact, for all we know, the only real friend she has besides the rover is Yuno. Because being someone like her in a position of power in a place like Septimont, everyone else either admires her or hates her. And this role that Augusta has as a leader is not only understandable but expected. I mean, I refuse to believe that there is any nation, regardless of what calamity it faces, where every single person would understand, root for, and love the leader they were given. There will always be at least a small faction that resents something about that leader, even if that hate is absolutely selfish or irrational. Because selfishness and stupidity is just as much a part of how leaders are realistically viewed. So while Mavuika may stand as the better depiction of a good leader, Augusta perfectly depicts the realistic position that leaders are often placed in. Also, Augusta is far from the perfect leader. That anxiety that Mavuika never displayed is showed immensely with Augusta. There are moments in the story where she doubts her own strength, where she second guesses herself. From her interlude quest where she had to fight 100 warriors to please just a single noble, to her actual quest where she faced the false sovereign, this massive looming force over her, the game made something perfectly clear. It did the exact opposite of what I expected. Looking at Augusta, this larger-than-life character, I thought the game would show me a woman every bit as powerful as she looked, but no. Instead, it showed me a human being. Augusta's story proved that it doesn't really matter who you are or where you are from. If you want greatness and you pursue it like your life depends on it, if you refuse to stop, refuse to hold back, and just keep moving forward, then there will be a point where you are acknowledged, a point where it all plays off. So on the topic of humanity, interest, and relatability, Augusta wins by a landslide. It is not even close. Now, just to be clear, this isn't to antagonize Genshin players, Wooden Waves players, or anyone who feels differently. This whole video has been both fun to make and a way to highlight how gacha storytelling has evolved over the years. Both Mavuika and Augusta show that characters today are written with way more depth than ever before, but at the same time, there are areas where they can improve, and as players, it is important to recognize those aspects. But I want to hear from you. What do you think about Mavuika as a character, as a leader, as a human being? Do you find her relatable or just fascinating? And what about Augusta? Do you see her as a leader or more as a deeply human character? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.